Hi, it's Alison from the Law School Toolbox. It is January, and we are talking about second semester, how to make a plan, get feedback, and even maybe use AI to help you get better grades. All right, well, first up, let's talk about probably most people's question of the day. What if you didn't get the grades you wanted? Lee, do you have any thoughts around that?
Well, given the curve, most people didn't get the grades that they wanted. Let's be honest.
True. Sad but true.
The curve is nasty. Most people are somewhat disappointed. So I think that, the place to start is really with your growth mindset, because getting grades that are less than what maybe you're accustomed to getting, which I think, again, is most people, it's hard. So you've got to make sure that you can, grieve a little and move forward. So by a growth mindset, what we really mean is to not just decide that you're a failure and let these grades define you. You want to remind yourself that disappointing grades are not the end of your legal career. They are an opportunity to learn and become a better law student and likely future lawyer. So one semester does not define your entire law school experience. It does not make you a certain type of future lawyer. You need to start focusing on what you can do differently and not on negative self-talk. And of course, if you're listening to this and you haven't gotten your grades back, you might say, of course, Lee and Allison, I don't have negative self-talk. Yeah, we're all perfectionists. We're all type A. All of us have negative self-talk. So this is something really to be careful about. And make sure that you stay in that place of growth. So this is a learning opportunity. Acknowledge the disappointment and then come up with a plan, and don't dwell in this, or it can take your second semester experience as well.
Yeah, you sometimes see people kind of give up and be like, well, I didn't do as well as I thought I was going to do, so there's no point in trying. And, I think that's unfortunate, because I do think there are people who take the information that they receive as their objective first semester results and say, okay, particularly if it's one class or maybe if it's even across the board, like, all right, if I'm below the curve across the board, I need to do something differently. I think that is kind of what we're looking for. Or if it's one class and it's like, all right, what happened in that class? How can I prevent it from happening in other places? Sometimes you just have a bad day, you get a weird question, whatever. But I think it's really this, kind of honest self-evaluation that is the really critical first step here.
And this is a little brutal. No one likes to do the honest self-evaluation.
No. And, I don't doubt that most people listening to this probably worked really, really hard, maybe harder than you've ever worked at any sort of academic experience ever. So this can be really difficult. It can be really difficult to say, I put in all this time and effort. I really tried my very, very best. I thought I was doing what I needed to do. I mean, some people might not be able to say that, but some people might. And then you get this kind of reality shock of like, oh, that is not what I was expecting.
Yeah.
And, for some people, they expected straight A's. That was probably unrealistic to start with. But, recalibrating expectations is always difficult.
Yeah. So if you are asking yourself, where do I begin with this honest self-evaluation? It really comes with asking yourself some thoughtful questions, such as really asking, how many hours did you actually spend preparing for class? Did you do the reading? Because we know that some students don't, and there is something to be learned from reading. You also want to ask yourself to be honest about how many hours you spent outlining and truly preparing for finals, not just sitting in the library, but actually doing the heavy lifting. Because the question is, were you studying enough, and were you studying in a way to get the appropriate outcome? Because busy work is really something that can happen in that first semester, especially when you're looking at all your other friends and you're saying that they are doing 12-hour days. And so you're going to do 12-hour days, but it turns out you're just doing busy work that's not really going to get you any closer to your goals. So,
right. And what I see a lot with first semester, and this is very understandable given how law school is structured, is people focus so much on the reading and briefing and being, if they got called on, they would know every single thing. And then what they didn't spend that much time on is actually preparing for finals and making sure you had a really clear idea of the law going into them. And did you have the appropriate materials prepared if you could bring stuff? And did you practice? Mm-hmm. Usually the answer to that is not that much. And did you get feedback if you did practice? There's almost always something in that process of like preparing for finals that, despite everybody's best intentions, did not happen.
Yeah. We also hear a lot from folks who fell behind at some point in the semester, that things were going fine until they got sick, or, there was a family emergency, or they just got behind.
Yeah.
They went away for the weekend and never were able to catch up. So if that happened, you really want to look and reflect on the calendar and look for those points where that happened, so you can plan around it as much as you can. Life still happens. To try to avoid that happening again. Because the problem is, once you're behind in law school, you just have to triage and be thoughtful about how to get out of it. You can't just double down and do double the work for a while. There's just not enough hours in the day.
No, there really aren't. And so I think this is one of those situations where you need to take that step back and really do a time management assessment of, did you have a study schedule? Did you like have time you were doing your reading? Did you have deep work time? Did you track your time? Did you know what you're doing? And then really reflect on that. Like, oh, I did put in my calendar 8 hours a week of working on my outlines, but usually I use that time to catch up on my reading. Okay, that's good information for you to have, because now you can understand like what the problem probably was. Like, until you've done that analysis of what you actually did and kind of identified some pain points, you don't know what to fix.
Yeah. Or, I did deep work. I did it all with my study group. And half of that time was spent just like complaining about law school or gossiping. And hey, I also liked to complain and gossip. So I'm not saying that, that you can't do that, but it doesn't count as this heavy lifting. So you really have to be honest with yourself. And I think around outlining is another moment where people have to be very honest. Because when we talk to students who are unhappy about their grades, I often ask, like, well, how did you prep for finals? Did you outline? Well, I get a lot of, I had 10 supplements, and I had 6 different outlines, and I'm using a commercial outline, and it was great. All the stuff was there. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not really outlining. That's not engaging with the material. And so, I think you also have to ask yourself, did you do the heavy lifting? Did it make you uncomfortable? And that's wasn't it, one of our favorite blog posts that we have is like, you should be uncomfortable when you're studying. That means that you're doing hard work and you're learning. If you're breezing through your study sessions, unless you're just incredibly brilliant, which, hey, maybe you are. But if you didn't get straight A's and you were breezing through your study time, then you probably weren't doing enough heavy lifting and making yourself uncomfortable and quizzing yourself so you can actually learn. Turns out fun learning doesn't really work as well as kind of challenging learning.
No, I think that's so true. And the other thing, I think if you did do better or worse in certain classes, like track that back to what you did. Did you take certain steps in the class that you did really well in, or maybe even surprisingly well in? And then, other ones you bombed, which you expected to do well in, but you prepared differently. Did you use a study group with one and not the other? Like, did you make your own outline or flowcharts or study aids, or even it might just be the type of exam, was one open book and one closed book? Like, okay, that's good information for you to have. If you did really well in an open book exam and bombed the closed book ones, well, you probably need to memorize more material.
Yeah, exactly. You also, need to look at your life, because I think that, I said that things can happen that could have derailed you. But, if you had health issues or other life challenges that came up to affect performance, make sure that you have a plan for getting those under control. Again, like, you can't stop from getting sick or having, sleep problems or whatever it might be. But don't wait until final exam time to handle those. Like, January is a great time to make appointments with all of the professionals that you need to make appointments for, to kind of right the ship and give yourself the best opportunity for stability in the next semester. Also, if you took crummy care of yourself, if you didn't move your body, if you didn't do any self-care, if you didn't go to therapy, if you didn't, all of that stuff, and you were like, I don't need it. Turns out you might have needed it. So make sure that you start carving out time and making a plan for how you're going to kind of, again, make your care a priority. If your body and mind isn't in a great place, you can't do law school. And it's just the reality.
No, I think that's so true. And maybe things like you realize you have sleep problems during exams. All right, go figure that out.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you had a computer problem because your computer was old or whatnot. These are all things that are unfortunate, but in some cases would actually be manageable. And I think getting that self-care plan in place, whether it's, you go take a gym class a couple of times a week or sign up for a yoga class or make a commitment with your friend to go running or, whatever it is that works best for you, you need to actually do that. And it's hard because it's winter now.
Mm-hmm.
And that is usually not everyone's favorite time to like get
I
out of
was
the
on the
house.
treadmill this morning because even in California, it is too cold for me. I'm
It's
like,
cold and dark. It is
and
getting
dark.
dark at like 4 something. I'm like, what is
Dark.
happening?
I know.
And we're still like 21 days or something from the solstice as
I
we're
know.
recording this. So yeah, we're still on the like darkening age of life,
Mm-hmm.
not the
But
January getting lighter. But yeah, I
yeah,
mean, particularly like if you're in, the Northeast, like it is brutal in the winter. But
yeah.
that just means you have to, even take more steps to like make an actual commitment to do it.
And also, if financial stress was part of what kind of derailed you, like let's say your budget didn't work, your loans weren't enough, your living situation's too expensive, this is a great time to work on that too. Because running out of money or not having money for food or feeling like you're having issues with your bills or that is all stress that can be avoided with some careful planning. So don't leave that till the end of the semester either. Oh my gosh, and taxes, right? Because
Oh
you also have to
God.
file your taxes during the second semester. So don't leave that till the end because tax season is like mid-semester when you would be studying for midterms. You don't want to be
Yeah.
doing your taxes then. So make sure you're doing that early in
Yeah.
the season.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. No, I mean all these delightful spring semester activities.
Yeah. Um, so the other thing that we really think you need to do is to go talk to your professors, which most people don't want to do if they didn't do well. And it sucks, but you need to go do it. The thing to remember is that most professors actually like law students. That's why they became professors. And they do want to help you, especially if you didn't do as well as you had hoped. So you need to figure out how they're handling exam reviews. Are they making appointments? Do you have to email them? Um, but you've got to figure out what each professor is doing and go.
Yeah, no, I think so. And I think that we get a lot of resistance to this idea. But ultimately, if you approach it as a learning experience with a positive attitude, growth mindset, and
Yep.
open mind, and you make it clear that you are not there to try to renegotiate your grade, which is not going to happen, so don't bother,
Nope.
but really go to them and say, look, I enjoyed your class. I enjoyed the material, if these things are remotely true, but I am kind of surprised by how I performed on the exam. And I'm just really hoping that you can help me understand what I could have done differently or like what I need to work on so that I can take that forward and like try to do better this semester. I mean, almost no one is going to be like rude to you at that point.
No, especially if you come in and you're like, I am trying to better myself as a law student. Like,
Yeah.
no professor is going to be like, that's a terrible idea.
I
Like,
mean, I
they're
wouldn't
all going
say
to be happy
no,
with it.
but
Okay, fair
mostly.
point. But like
There are a
most
few
of them.
people who might be jerks, but most people
That's
are going
true.
to be like, yeah, I get it. Like maybe I can't help you in the way that you want to be helped because there is no magic wand but I'm at least willing to sit down with you and say like, this is a place where you either like missed some issues or you didn't explain yourself or whatever it is.
Yeah. The other thing you should listen for, especially if you're someone who's always had a bit of an inkling that you may have some sort of neurodiversity, is that sometimes professors will call this out and say, based on your work, it looks like that there could be an issue here with ADHD, or there could be an issue here with, this or whatnot. Listen to the professors. Like, that doesn't mean that that's a diagnosis, but if you're sitting there and the professor says, this is consistent with what I've seen with students who may have these struggles, then maybe you want to take a trip to disability services and see what resources your school may have for you, especially if that's something that you've wondered about in the past or have ever gotten feedback about. Because here's the thing about accommodations, everyone. If you do not get them in law school, they are not going to give them to you on the bar. And so I know the bar is changing and all of that, but if you need accommodations to level a playing field, you're going to want them. And so waiting too long to get evaluated and set the paper trail is not going to help.
Right. And
It's
I
not
think
going
there
to
are
help.
things, yeah, if you reflect on your exam experience and you think about, did I have a panic attack? Did my mind completely go blank for half of the test and I was unable to write anything or think? You know, did I massively run out of time? Can I like have no ability to organize my work? These are the
Mhm.
sort of things that you might be thinking like, maybe this is like outside of the realm of like, I was a little nervous and I didn't quite know how to structure my answer. It's the sort of thing that, maybe your brain is working in different ways and that is totally fine. But you might need extra time to get the same thoughts down that somebody who is not neurodivergent needs. So if you reflect on your experience and you think, these things seem a little extreme, I would probably explore that further.
For sure. So going back to your professors, if you have different professors this semester, I think it is also a good idea to set an intention that you're going to engage with them. So, for instance, put their office hours on your Google Calendar and make sure you bring them questions. Again, don't show up to office hours and just say, like, will you explain to me what was covered in class? Because I didn't get it. They're not going to do that.
No.
But if you say, like, I was outlining this and I don't understand how this law relates to this law, or I was trying to answer this hypo and I don't know if I applied the law correctly here. Like they're going to reward that behavior, but you do have to go to office hours and again, enter with a growth mindset and try and engage with them and the material. And the other thing is, these professors are going to be the professors you're going to ask for letters of recommendation for things later. So it's a great time to develop these relationships. And a professor loves a student who comes to office hours and asks thoughtful questions. It doesn't mean that you need to get the highest grade in the class. They just want to see that you're actively engaged. So there's a reward for that too.
Right. And I think there's a reward for going early and going frequently and not waiting until the very last minute. Because again, if you wait until a week before the exam, they're going to be totally slammed.
Yeah.
So this is something we think would be a great idea to do throughout the semester. Same thing with you. If you have a TA who has TA sessions, go to those. I was a TA. I had TA sessions. They were helpful. Some people didn't show up to them.
Yeah.
I'm like, you are missing out here. Like, I am actually working hard to like give you help and you are not here to receive it. That is your choice, but I don't think that was a great idea.
Yeah. 100%. Okay. So you've done all this. You've been honest with yourself. You've gone to these appointments. You have gotten feedback. And now what do you do? So, now it's like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
So I really think you have to think about it in different buckets. So first you need to think about class prep. And if you do not use a calendar to manage your time, please start doing this. I know, but
Please.
we know that some students don't do it. And this is one of my favorite AI hacks is that like AI will make you the like calendar, like things that you can upload. What do you call them? Those invites or whatever, and just like populate your calendar. If you give them a list of dates, it's magic. I mean, I would even think that you could load your reading assignments into your Google Calendar. So Google could like run it all. I mean, it's pretty cool. But you want to make sure that at a glance, you know when all of your classes are, you know when office hours are, and you've blocked out things like deep work and outlining time. And all of that, you want it very easy to reference. So if that is not something you've been doing, I think it's worth spending some time to really like up your organization game so you can stay ahead of your reading. You can come up with a plan based on your class schedule. You can make sure that you're reviewing things before class. So you go into class, a bit fresh. And then this is going to prevent you from falling behind. Like we said earlier, that like if there's one little misstep, you're not going to lose a week or two of work and then not be able to catch up. So
Yep.
yeah, I think that's pretty critical.
Well, and the other thing you need to put on there is any type of like legal writing assignments. You might be doing moot court in the second semester, but you're going to probably have some type of legal research and writing thing going on. And so all of that needs to be in there because then you need to you need to start thinking about, all right, well, in the week or two before these things are going to be due, I'm probably not going to have as much time for reading. Well, you can plan all that out now and front load some of it versus opening up your calendar on a Monday when you have an assignment due on Thursday and being like, oh gosh, my entire week just got shot. I can't do any of the reading for class. I'm going to have to skip class to get this assignment done. That is not setting yourself up for success.
No. And, if you've got in these blocks of deep work or review, you're more likely to do it, or move it. This is my favorite life hack is that even if I don't want to do something, I just put it on my calendar and then it's very hard for me to ignore it. I typically move it. Even at an appointment I don't want to go to, I'm likely to reschedule it over canceling it. And so you do just want to have that blocked out, and you can, again, use AI to make it very easy. You don't even have to create it. They will do it for you, but make sure that you have these blocks and then think about what you're going to spend that time doing. Is it going through your notes? Is it starting to outline? Is it doing practice questions? Make an agenda for yourself so you know that you're doing these tasks to get, closer and closer to the exam. The benefit of having been through a semester is you now know what the end game is. And now you can prep for that end game, whereas you were a bit flying blind first semester.
Absolutely. I think you hopefully have a much clearer idea of what you need to do. Just put a recurring event. You can repeat things on a Google Calendar. Some people apparently don't know this. Very simple. You go into the more feature or whatever, and you're every Sunday for the afternoon, I want you to put deep work, and then you will figure out what to do with that time. But if you don't put it on there, you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
And I think, accountability can also be super helpful, whether it is an accountability partner, maybe a body doubling, you study across from a classmate. You can track your time. You can use a visual system like our circles method. You can even consider a tutor. Also academic support should probably be consulted if you're not happy. Find out what they can offer you. Do you have peer tutoring? Schools have quite a number of resources generally, depending on the school. But you want to take advantage of those resources because I do think accountability, it's great to hold yourself accountable, but there's also something else about someone else expecting you to show up to meet them for a study session that probably is going to be pretty motivating.
Yeah. I also am a big fan of repeatable events. You were saying about the Google Calendar. I really am critical of cognitive offloading to an extent, but I do love the repeatable event. So I use a to-do list that every Monday I get repeatable events, which are just administrative tasks that I have to do once a week. And then today is the first day of the month, and I saw my crop of first day of the month administrative tasks pop up. But it just keeps me accountable. There are just certain things that I can say, I'll do that night later, or I'll do that later. No, they're just the things I do on Monday or the things that I do on the first day of the month. And I love not having to remember to do those things. And so, it's also a great time to ask yourself, what can I automate for myself, to make sure my rent is paid, or if I have to, even remind my roommates to split the PG&E bill or whatever it might be. Just either automate that. You can even schedule emails to go out once a month to remind people to send you money for things, right? Especially if you're splitting expenses. Anything you can do to just remove that from your plate is going to make all the rest of this stuff easier. So a little pre-planning can make your whole second semester a lot easier.
I think that's so true. And I think this also plays into the academic side of things. So, most people, let's be honest, probably didn't do as much practice as they would have wanted. So just start doing those earlier. Don't wait until a couple of weeks before your exam. Start practicing a couple of weeks into the semester.
Oh, you could put it on your Google Calendar.
Right. Exactly. You could right now, have that on a Saturday, Saturday, I don't care, Sunday, Saturday's deep work and Sunday's practice day. That's fine. Because I think what a lot of people, the key insight here is I understand everything is not the same thing as being able to apply it. So, we talk to a lot of people who are not happy with their grades and say, well, I generally understood the material, but. And so that but is basically what your biggest way to improve is going to be. Because if you can force yourself early on to do practice in the format you're going to be tested on, then it's going to be much more familiar when you actually get the exam. So it helps with anxiety. Just generally you're going to be faster and better. But if you don't practice until the very end, you're probably not going to see a lot of improvement. I'm sorry. It's just the way it is.
Yeah. I also think it's important when you think about your deep work, your practice blocks, that you really need to make sure it is high impact setting, which means no distractions. Oh my gosh, I'm starting to feel like a broken record, but it is so important. And the more reading I do on this topic, the more passionate I get about it. So you must put your devices away. I would, go old school, turn off your Wi-Fi if you do not need it to do the work that you are doing. Block apps, block websites, take a social media break, like turn off your email. Like it is really important to, be your best self. And if you are finding that you cannot focus to do your reading or studying, it is highly likely that your technology use and your scrolling is ruining your attention. It really is. The data is really bad and it's fragmenting your ability to do focused work. And so you have to take steps back from some of these ongoing distractors to give yourself the best chance at retaining information.
Yeah, because the reality is what you're doing when you're preparing for class and doing the reading and doing deep work and practice, these are really hard things.
Mm-hmm.
And it's harder than what most people have had to think about probably for most of their life. So it's going to be exponentially harder to do that thinking if you're being interrupted by an email and a notification and a this and a that, because every single time your brain has to switch focus, it takes minutes to get back into focus. So if you are being constantly interrupted and you can look at your phone and it will tell you how many notifications you get in a day, it is probably hundreds.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's like you cannot sit and focus and do work, particularly if you have any type of ADHD situation, and have all these things like bothering you, basically. It's crazy. And I know it sounds very like, oh God, you guys are such a drag. But yeah, as Lee said, the data is really bad on this.
It's really bad. It's really bad. I mean, don't take time to read it right now because you don't have time. But it's bad. Just trust us. It's really bad. I mean, yesterday I was looking at screen time. That's a whole nother story. And I will get into why I was spending time going through my screen time and everyone in my household screen time. But I think on a Sunday, so not a work day, when you and I talk to each other on our phones, like a lot. But on a non-work day, I think I got 125 text messages.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. I mean, like, that's a lot. That's 125 text messages throughout the day.
You
That's
mean like notification?
Notification.
Yeah. I was
Well,
like,
but I mean, like,
that much, but yeah.
but like, I got 125 or so notifications.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds, that
but that was just about messages. That wasn't like,
Oh.
that wasn't like FedEx now texts me too. So that's probably why, because it's the holiday season. But I mean, still, even if it was just 100, it was a lot. I mean, when you, it's a lot
every
of
day.
notifications.
If I look at my phone, it's always over. It's usually between 100 and 200 notifications, and I'm like, what even were those?
I know, right? Yeah. So it is really something to be aware of, and that there is power in turning off your devices. I think it is very hard for us to remember that we have that power. And if you are wondering if you can even step back from social media for 7 days, we have a podcast on that. And if anyone listened to that podcast and is wondering if we have gone back, we have not. We have not. So
yeah, and every person I bring this up to is like, oh, I could never do that. I'm like, that is exactly why you need to.
That is exactly what you need to. So you can listen to that podcast for a little motivation to step away from your social media and interruptions for at least 7 days.
I think if we're thinking of, a growth mindset, things we might want to improve, it's just something to evaluate. Were you extremely distracted by your phone? Were you fighting with a boyfriend who was texting you stuff all the time? It's just like, like you probably should just leave the phone at home and make it clear to people that between these hours, I'm actually not reachable.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That happened to me when I was working back in the day, but that was like Gmail. That was a big, this is how old we are, but it was like a big deal that you could check your personal email on your work computer because you could do it through a browser. And then he was sending me these like sappy, like dramatic emails, and I get them in the middle of the day. And I knew I shouldn't have been checking my personal email, but it was like a train wreck and I couldn't stop. Like I should have just closed Gmail. It was open on a browser. I could have just been like, not while I'm at work.
Yeah.
But I wasn't mature enough to do that.
Yeah, working for the judge and some guy I got on like 2 dates with was like flipping out at me. And I was just like, I just can't, dude. Like, you need to stop. I'm like in the middle of working. I have an important job. Like, you need to stop.
Yeah. Or you have a family member that's unloading on you. I mean, it's really, it can be a lot of different things. It can be a friend who's going through a hard time, who's looking for support. You can still support them, but maybe not in these certain hours of protected time.
Like, you can support them, just not between 1 and 6.
I know, that's true. I know it sounds really harsh, but most people can make it till 6. And then you can be present for them.
Right,
because
exactly.
part of the problem is you're not really present if you're just shooting off texts in between doing other hard things. You're not doing anything well. I think that's the reality, is that you're not really showing up for your academics. You're not showing up for the other people in your life. Like, if somebody's in crisis and needs your attention, give them your attention.
Right. But after dinner.
After dinner.
Lunch to dinner, you're working. After dinner, you can have a call with them.
Yeah.
And I think people, I know it's hard to set boundaries sometimes, but I really think people are fine with it generally, unless they're totally crazy. But, to be like, I need this time to like get my work done, but I would love to talk to you at 6 p.m. about this.
Yeah. I also love
turn the phone off.
Yeah. I also love a good schedule send like text message. You can also, like, if you know that somebody wants to hear from you the next day, but you don't want to be interrupted, schedule that message. There are people I just check in with regularly in my life. Sometimes I schedule them, those messages. So then the phone is just doing it for me and I'm going about my other work. And I'm not texting with them at, whatever time because I'm busy doing other things. It still allows people to be cared for in a, technology supportive way. But anyway, okay. But here's something that we've started talking about more and more, and we have another episode on this that on AI and how can AI help you in law school, and then also specifically how AI can help you with your second semester strategy. And initially, this made me think of our interesting podcast that you did with Lindsay Scola about how she uses ChatGPT to support her and her struggles with ADHD. She's not a lawyer, but she's a very high functioning person who had a lot of interesting things to say. But I think even for folks that are not ADHD, AI can be helpful in coming up with a plan for second semester.
Yeah, I agree. And, I think as we're thinking of all the different things we could be thinking about, I think if you got super bogged down in certain things that seemed incredibly time consuming, I think, are there ways that maybe you could simplify that? Possibly. I think this would be a great thing to look at AI for. It might be able to help you like suss out situations in your writing where maybe you were too conclusory or things like that. Again, I think this is a great thing to talk about with your professors or academic support or TAs, or just like things they're interested in or they're using it for, they're doing. That being said, of course, you want to make sure you're within any of your school's boundaries. You don't want to be using it to just do your work for you. That's probably not allowed. But, think about ways. I think for me is always identify the pain point and then think about ways you might be able to work around that. So in some cases, using AI to like supplement other resources could be a good idea.
Yeah. I also saw a recommendation about like having AI explain concepts to you and then having you explain them back to AI and have AI decide if you were doing it well. I think that for some folks who want an interactive element, it can be a bit of a false interactive element to it. But some people learn better that way. We would often tell students, to teach your stuffed animal or like to teach your cat or your dog. I think you could use AI in that way too, but you really have to make sure that it is pulling correct law, that it is aligned with how your professor is teaching, and that you are not just letting it go off on its own because you don't know what it's pulling, what's in its library that it's decided is the right answer. So you do have to critically evaluate. But I don't think there's anything wrong with using it to study. Like I said, I think it can also be helpful for students, especially who struggle with executive functionings, to create some scaffolding. It can help you. If you don't know what a reasonable study schedule is, you could tell it, I need this many hours to read and I need this many hours to do deep work, and ask it to make you Google appointments, and it can do that for you. And maybe that's really hard for you. And so like that is a great way to use it.
Yeah, and I think things like breaking down tasks, it can be really great at, where it can be very overwhelming to say, I have this paper due in 3 weeks. Like, I don't know where to even get started. You can kind of do the backwards planning that can be helpful for people with ADHD, but have it do it with you, like brainstorm. So like, what are the things I need to do? And like, can you help me schedule those? Stuff like that, I think, great. Yeah, so I think it's worth considering as part of your kind of toolbox of things you're going to implement. And it really goes a lot of it back to that organizational piece. If this is something that's going to help you get organized and help you stay on track, fantastic. Here for it.
Yeah. But do not turn it into another way to waste time.
Exactly.
Because sometimes tech even new cool tech is just one more way for us to waste time. And
Yeah.
also just remember that in the end, the AI is not going to go with you to the exam, probably. I doubt most, academic like honor codes are going to
Yeah.
allow you to take AI into an exam. So you are still responsible for the material. So, if AI is testing you, still make sure that you can, apply the law to the facts, because in the end, it's still your work. So just be very conscious of it. Remind yourself what AI is good at and not good at, and use a critical eye. Because, finding its mistakes is another way of learning. So, that's fine too. Just make sure that you're not assuming that it is your perfect legal expert tutor, because unfortunately it is not perfect and it is not a legal expert as much as it may present itself as such.
Yeah, I think like with everything, you have to evaluate what's going to work for you and what the best tools are. But this, the basic idea of like evaluate what happened, figure out a plan forward, implement that plan, check on how you're doing, get some accountability. These are the things that can really move you forward. And like you said in the beginning, one semester of grades you're not happy with is not going to sink your entire legal career. I know it can feel like that. But if you see a nice upswing in the second semester, that is a story you can tell later of, first semester was a little rough, but I took a step back, I reevaluated, I made some changes, and as you can see, I did a lot better second semester. That's a story we're going for here.
Yeah, exactly. Well, everyone needs to get back to work because we gave you a lot of stuff to do. So I think we have to wrap up this podcast. But if you enjoyed this video, please take a second to give us a like. You can leave us a comment and let us know what is helping you as you regroup for the second semester. And be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any future content. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us via the contact form on lawschooltoolbox.com. Thanks for watching.